about breakfast.
So, my name's Edward. We're starting a podcast where it's called the Ashby Room, and a little bit of background on that. The room where everyone unwinds after class in the Executive MBA of UC Berkeley is called the Ashby Room in the Residence Inn. I thought it was an apt name since I want to keep these conversations fairly casual, but also at the heart of it discuss, who you are. I've got my first guest here, and also career, what you want to do in the future. So let's go ahead and get started. Denis Murphy,
Hello.
what's your story? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So really, for me, I've been a bit of a wanderer. As you people might guess from the accent, I grew up in England, but nowadays I live in Canada, in Vancouver. So I'm one of the people who commutes up and down the coast. Although, weirdly enough, people who live in America seem to travel further than than I do. But my background is really kind of coming from that international aspect as being a big part of it. So, my mum's Brazilian, and I've lived in the UK, in the Caribbean, in Canada.
I think your first trivia for us in the orientation was, I've got 3 passports. Guess where they're from? And you threw out, I think, Latin America as a hint, and I was like, it's Brazil.
It's my swarthy good looks. That's what does it.
It is. It is. And I think the character, I think it adds to your character, and just in the little ways we hit it off. I think. And I think a lot of it was because I was like, there's a lot there from, not just what your job is, which is super interesting, but also I think you said it yesterday. It's like we kind of have a congruent work behavior with home behavior. I think it resonates.
Yeah, and I think that's something for me that we talk over this immersion week a lot about authenticity, and we talk about kind of bringing your true self, and that's not necessarily something about being kind of simplistic or shallow in how you present yourself, but it's something that has always been part of my makeup, and not really looking to kind of bullshit things.
In under a minute, can you describe what we were doing here this week? You mentioned authentic leadership. And where are we?
So we're in beautiful Santa Cruz at the Charmende Resort, which is a lovely spot up here in the hills. But fundamentally, what it's about is a couple of things. There's the direct coursework that we're doing, which is centered around how can we be better leaders? How can we communicate better? So taking those skills and being change agents and understanding how we can be storytellers and push that narrative forward, and really thinking deeply about how we connect with others and that people-centric approach to leadership. But then there's also, I think, a grander purpose, which is really around how do we come together as a cohort. And this immersion week happens early, not accidentally. It happens because it's a really effective way of getting 70 plus people together, get them to be open and share.
Yeah, the first session was to bring a personal artifact, heirloom, or something just important to you. And I think that was the session that most people cried, which sounds ridiculous, but when people bring something that's important to them, there's a lot of meaning and a lot that you have to unpack to describe why it means so much. And sometimes it's loss, sometimes it's a lot of growth. Like where this is where I want to be, and this is my motivation for it. Yeah, from my perspective, this week is kind of weird, right? I told my boss this week is about leadership, and he kind of rolls his eyes. Like, this is why I can never do an MBA. But I do think there's a lot to get out of it. A lot of tangible practice. Nobody gives a perfect presentation. Okay, most people don't give a perfect presentation their first attempt. Rehearse it a few times, maybe it's a little better. You never really get the chance to mess up, get some really good feedback, and then try it again immediately. It's usually something, okay, I'll write that down. Maybe you'll try it again in a few months when you have to do another presentation.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the things for me. If we talk about kind of the valuable elements within the week, is that direct feedback and that ability to pause in a kind of non-judgmental way, in a way where you think it's actually, this is a conversation where I'm going to get value for it. I'm not going to get chastised for it. And someone just going, hey, have you thought about this? Have you tried, that approach?
Yeah. One more question, and then we'll move over a little bit more about yourself. What was your favorite part about this week? And maybe least favorite?
Favorite part is easy. It's the class. Like, and you talk to any class that comes ahead of you, and they say, hey, like, the thing that you'll get out of this more than anything else, like, ignore the education for a second, it's the people, it's the network. And I know that on a kind of rational level, but being here and having opportunity to speak to all of these people, speak to these really wonderful human beings, that's just been it's been inspirational, but more importantly, it's been fun. It's been getting together as a group. In terms of what's been hard, I think it's undeniable that when you come into a course like this and you come into somewhere like Berkeley, standards are high, and I think that people generally put those standards on themselves and put that pressure on themselves. And it's easy to say, hey, look, let it go, it's all good. But that pressure and the pressure you put on yourself is always hard.
Yeah, just minutes before we started this, we both submitted our final presentations for this week. We're both like, it's not really perfect. It's not like what I would submit if it were graded as a final product, a standalone product. But that's not that's not the whole point. The whole point is to deliver something with some supporting slides and to let go in a very type A environment. Yeah. And that feeling of, am I going to get left behind? We got to get over that. At least that's how I felt.
Yeah, no, 100%. What you made me think of is that, I was in class, yesterday, and one of the people in my group was basically saying, hey, everyone here wants you to do well. Like, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Now, of course, you're still going to worry about it, but I think there is an element of recognizing this as a journey. And recognizing that, like, hey, you need to put that marker down, you need to get the work done, but you need to move on. When it's over, it's over.
I love that. The what was it? Immutable laws of the spirit.
Yeah.
So now there's 75 of us in the class. We're interviewing Denis Murphy first, or not an interview, this is a conversation. What do you do? Tell me about your career.
Yeah. So I work for a company called Nch'ǩay, and that is the economic development arm for a First Nation up in Canada, for the Squamish First Nation. So I work a lot in the Indigenous space, but on the commercial side of things. So really what we're tasked with is being that kind of source of wealth generation, being able to bolster the economy of the Squamish Nation, provide jobs, provide opportunities for businesses and the like, but also be a revenue generator and fund programs and services, all from a commercial lens.
And what's your role?
So I'm the chief financial officer. So I'm the numbers guy.
The Mr. Moneybags.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the guy who's supposed to say no, there isn't any money. No, I joking aside on that one, I think that my role is really around, how do we say yes to things, and how do we make sure that the resources are there and they're used, effectively.
It's an interesting problem because you're not necessarily a normal corporation where priorities are brand and revenue. What are the priorities for an organization like this?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We are, super plugged in to the community, and for good and for the frustrations that brings as well. But when we think about values, don't get me wrong, we are here to be a commercial enterprise. Like, it is important that we make money because ultimately we want to be able to flow that back into the community. But we have to do it in the right way. Like, we have to be super conscious about when we make decisions that we're not making the kind of decisions that are against the kind of broader values that nation members have, that are disrespectful to knowledge keepers within the community, elders within the community. And, fortunately, we think that there's a path there. We think that, the way that the world operates nowadays is actually coming back into a line with some of these values that Indigenous groups across the world have kind of not letting go of. And I think some other people have forgotten some of that intergenerational perspective.
Is there a value that either resonates with you or that you think might surprise a Western perspective that, is non-typical?
Yeah, less of a surprising one, but perhaps, kind of building on what I was just saying, it's really that intergenerational perspective. People often talk about, 7 generations. How are we doing? What work are we doing today that will impact 7 generations down the line? And so, that takes the perspective that we might have and really shifts it from that short-term goal and into the long-term goal. So, one of the big projects that we're part of is a huge, net zero development project called Nch'ḳay. It's going to be all told a $2.8 billion project, 6,000 homes, right out of the center of downtown Vancouver. And our approach to it is not what you might consider like a typical developer's approach. So it's like, hey, let's build this product, high quality, get people in, turn it over and get out, move on to the next. We're much more concerned with building community. We're much more concerned with how do we do all of that work that we need to do as a developer and then stay and then make sure that people are engaged with it, and not just nation members, not just supporting, elders or people who need affordable housing in the broader community, but everyone in the community. And how do they engage? And that ultimately all comes from a view that we want this to work for hundreds of years rather than the next year or two.
That's pretty powerful. Like a normal corporation might not have the same guiding principle, even though they want long-term success. I had a question about how you got into a First Nation commercial arm. Like, you're coming from a very diverse background,
yeah.
But I don't think you have a First Nations background.
No. I get asked this question a fair amount, and the real answer is that whenever I've been looking for work, I didn't have the intention of like, hey, I must work in the Indigenous space. That's my goal in life. I've always looked at work and gone, how can I find a job that provides me with interesting questions within the finance space that ultimately cannot be answered by finance? You're having to make some of these judgment calls. You're having to say, like, how much capital do I invest in this particular project? How many staff do I hire? Which have concrete financial numbers attached to them. But if you're saying, hey, look, my capital investment is in a an elder center or a longhouse, or it's in, the programming for a site to make it more sympathetic to, cultural values and the like. I mean, how do you even value those? You
Where's
can't.
the ROI?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the ROI on culture? And the fact that you can't answer those questions fascinates me. I find it really interesting to be able to be in those positions where ultimately you want to bring data, you want to bring some of these kind of like hard, like sciences to things and numbers, and recognize that sometimes it's just about what's in the heart rather than what's in the head or the spreadsheet.
That's awesome. For the last 2 mornings, we did something called the quotidian, where we talked about, we did some exercises, physical exercises. Then we took 3 minutes looking back, some reflections, and then we looked forward. What are we looking forward to? What are our goals for the day? Let's do one a little more long-term, like your whole life. Looking back, how did you get into finance? And then you're here getting your MBA from Berkeley. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I ended up in finance just because I can add up. That's what it really boils down to, and that's where the money's at. I've always been chasing that. I get into finance because ultimately that's kind of how my mind works. I like analytical problems. I like problems with uncertainty and difficult contexts, but those are kind of broader questions. And I think the value I bring is being able to kind of boil that down to a, how do we have, a logic question, or how do we have a numbers question that's associated with those. And then in terms of long term, for me, one of the stories that was told in class.
First ground rules, confidentiality.
100%. This is I don't think I'm oversharing. Was talking about one of the teachers was talking about a 90-year-old grandmother and in college and all of these things. So for me, it's that pursuit of continued self-improvement, continued education, and being able to make sure that I am able to add more, obviously intrinsically to myself, but be able to contribute more to the community. And the second part to it really is the network effect and the people who I get to interact with, yourself foremost, of course. But you build these networks and you build these connections with people who you recognize are more likely than not to be of similar kind of mindset, similar value perspective. And so that that down the line, 10 years hence, 20 years hence, you pick up the phone and go, "Hey, Edward, I have this problem. I need to digest it. Can you help me do that?" And I don't think you can get that in other contexts.
Yeah, it really surprised me coming to orientation, actually even at the first mixer, I believe, where I was trying to make my way to the bar, and I didn't get there for 30 minutes. Like, it was person after person that wanted to chat just to learn who I was. They were very interesting themselves, but everybody had this willingness to open up. And even people that, like a demographic that I just don't talk to very often. So it's like, oh, wow, this is very refreshing. And then I realized it's also very, very Berkeley, like what we're doing this week. Some guys were talking about other business schools. They're like, they wouldn't touch anything like this.
No.
The feelings, yeah. Right?
And one of the things I definitely want to say about that is it struck me how much people have just naturally, when they're asking questions and initiating a conversation with someone who they've just met in the class, how often it's been, well, tell me about yourself, and not been, oh well, hey, here's my cool startup that I'm working on. You know.
I don't think I got a single pitch
No.
about. I mean, sure, like actually, I got more people like trying to downplay their accomplishments. Right, the average age is 40. The median age is 40. Everybody's kind of like a director level or above in their chosen fields, and some looking to pivot, some looking just to learn. And I think when I saw the class list, I was like, I want to hear more of their stories. So I had this inkling and an idea for a podcast. I asked you first. I figure, at the very least, the accent will help. The personality, I'm pretty sure of that too.
Also, you set the bar low, so that's good. You can only go up from here.
No, we're gonna use the first few episodes to sell it to the rest of the class, but it seemed like there was already some excitement.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for a next guest? Somebody you really want to either learn more about them or get their story out there?
Oh my God, there's so many people. Like that's an unfair question. Literally, kind of everyone in the class has a story to tell, and obviously we're in a context where people are sharing and people are being vulnerable in class, and this isn't the forum for talking about that. But you hear these stories, and you hear the kind of the path that people's taken, the passion, the drive, the intellect. I want to hear more about you. I want 75 editions of this. I want everyone to be kind of sharing a little bit about themselves. Just for my own gratification.
Yeah, I think the target audience I have for a podcast like this is somebody kind of like a younger professional learning to seeking to understand, how might I become a CFO one day, or why might I be interested in getting an MBA as a medical professional? We have a lot of military veterans, and they're looking for something to put in their resume so that they can make the transition. And some that are already deep in their careers, right? There's a wide net I'm trying to cast, and I'm just trying to close out the show. Any comments you want to make? Things you want to get out there?
Yeah, I mean, if I think about the class of 26, or the class of 27, or those people, who might come after, who are thinking about it, I think it's inevitably kind of doing something like this is a big decision. Well, there's no doubt about it, and it's not something that people take trivially. And as part of that process, really need to think about what are your values, and looking at how those values line up, because ultimately I think Berkeley, for sure, is an institution that has really deeply ingrained values, and if you look at programs, and if you look at this program or others, and you think, hey, this is the one that lines up with my values, then there's some magic there, as you know. I applied for one course, and one course only, because my take was, I want to do that program at that institution, or I'm good. And I think that people, if they see that resonance, just take the plunge, do it. It's gonna be a tough journey. It's gonna be a bit of a wild ride, but you'll feel it in here that